Buying a newly developed property in an area you love should be the beginning of a beautiful relationship with your home. But what happens when that dream is literally washed away? This is living proof that water is your home's worst enemy. Tonight on Help, My House is Falling Down, Dennis thought she'd found her very own sanctuary.
When I saw the flat, I walked into it that day and fell in love with it.
What she got was a living space unfit for human habitation.
I mean, this is just like living in a hovel. You wouldn't let people live like this 100 years ago.
Forced out of half of her flat.
The whole of the lower ground floor is unusable.
So with such serious problems, saving this house could be the biggest challenge yet.
I would like to continue living here in good circumstances.
In South London, Gypsy Hill is home to designer Dennis Richardson.
It's a very nice villagey area with lots of cafes and pubs and bars and quite nice kind of neighbourly feel.
10 years ago, fiercely independent Dennis viewed a newly developed split-level Georgian flat and her mind was instantly made up.
It was an immediate thing. I just knew I wanted to live there. Moving in was a bit of a nightmare because I had so much stuff. I had an army of friends who helped me. Everybody instantly loved it. Everybody sort of felt that it had a nice vibe about it when we came in. It all seemed like it was going to be, you know, ideal.
Dennis's happiness in her dream home lasted just 3 years. In 2004, a mysterious smell proved to be an early warning sign. It was just the start of what became a litany of problems.
When you moved a piece of furniture, there'd be damp behind it. The skirting boards were getting damp and wet, and the water seemed to be coming up from under the floor somehow.
Then home life became not only unpleasant, but seriously unsafe.
The electrics were starting to sort of fizz a bit. So I switched them off at the main, pulled the socket from the wall, and the wall just crumbled around it, and there was water literally pouring down the back of the socket.
The damp spread from appearing along one wall to affecting the whole of the lower ground floor.
There's now mould all over the place, and I noticed the walls had got very soft, and I got out of bed one day and fell into the wall and literally fell through the wall into the bathroom. Where the water seemed to be dripping in on corners, the concrete floor was actually disintegrating. So there are now holes in the concrete floor that fill up with water. When it's at its worst, it floods downstairs, both the back room and the front room.
Conditions got so dire that Dennis was forced to move herself upstairs. The foul-smelling water had bullied her out of her own bedroom.
The whole of the lower ground floor is unusable.
Over the years, she's called on various trades to solve the problem. But with no one so far able to give a definitive answer, Dennis is feeling abandoned to her fate. And if that wasn't enough, Dennis has found herself under attack from a foreign invader in the garden.
I've now got Japanese knotweed in the back garden. That's the other thing that's materialised in the last few months. It's a bit of a nightmare, and it re-roots itself if you don't clear it completely. If I thought about all the negative things that have happened with this property, I'd probably just want to walk away. But I do love this flat, and I do like this area. And I would like to continue living here in good circumstances. And that's it, really.
Her living conditions are horrific, and her property is in a truly desperate state. Fixing this will be a really tough challenge. We start outside in the garden. Japanese knotweed may look like an ordinary weed, but it's Britain's most invasive plant, and really bad news for a property and its value. Japanese knotweed can grow up to 2 metres in one season. Its roots spread 7 metres away, and it can render buildings unmortgageable because it grows so fast and it's so invasive. They're weeds, but they're a terrible pest, really. Interestingly, on the Olympic site for 2012, they spent 4 years trying to fight back Japanese knotweed. It's a very serious problem, and it's very, very difficult to control. As we go downstairs to the lower ground floor, I'm met by a stench, which smells remarkably like sewage, and by some of the worst destruction I've ever seen. This is really bad down here. I'm not going to dress it up.
The lower ground level is pretty much unlivable.
It really smells of damp and rotting timbers, and clearly there's been a significant amount of water that's come in. You know, there's a seriously big mountain we have to climb here, which is somehow to find out why so much water is coming in to your flat. Poor Dennis. This looks to me like a health hazard. Along with the smell, there's constant noise from a pump in Dennis's second bedroom that's been fitted in an attempt to offer a solution. This is really bad. You've got a pump going all the time in here.
Yes, yeah, it has to be on all the time, because otherwise that hole just fills up with water and it spreads out over the floor.
I think there is a bit of a story somewhere here, though, because you do have a 4-inch waste pipe running down the inside of this house to here. It would be reasonable to suppose that there is a pair to that next door.
Okay.
And there I think we might find the
root
end
of the problem.
of the story. Electric pumps are no fix for such massive water ingress. All 4 rooms in this basement are sodden. The smell from the damp and the water is putrid, and the air is thick with mould spores. How on earth has Dennis's dream home been reduced to this? I think there's a really interesting journey here, because you moved into a newly modernised flat.
Yeah.
Inside, it was spanking new.
Absolutely
and smelt
everything.
of clean paint.
Yeah.
And then over the last 10 years, it slowly slipped back to really, honestly, I would call this unmodernised now. Just from my point of view, I'm obviously coming in from a complete outsider, and it's really rich me saying this, but how did you sort of leave it?
Leave it to get this bad? Well, I didn't actually leave it. I tried to investigate it. Everybody who came in gave me a different answer as to what the problem was.
As a general golden rule, from my experience, I think that with a problem such as this, if you really just don't know which way to go, I would go to a structural engineer.
Good piece of advice for the future that I will live by.
Have you found it a lot of responsibility to care for this building on your own?
Yes, it's a big problem from the point of view of just having to deal with it as an individual.
And do you have family and friends?
Got lots of family and friends who are always determinedly trying to help, but I'm not very good at accepting help.
Sometimes, though, if people want to help, it's
I
not
know.
a sin to ask for it.
Well, I've learnt that one.
Yeah, well, good, because it's going to be beautiful again, the flat.
Made me cry again now.
Oh, I am sorry, aren't I horrible? Make me really sad. We're facing a build-up of terrible problems attacking Dennis's home. They're amongst the worst I've seen. The Japanese knotweed, potentially lethal electrics, and chronic flooding that is swamping the entire basement, threatening the stability of not only Dennis's flat, but the whole building. This is one of the worst habitated spaces I've seen. Dennis has clearly been suffering in silence for a long time. Something needs to happen, and it needs to happen fast. The only snag is, it's not going to come cheap. It's going to be a specialist job to find out how we can help with the extreme problems in this flat.
Probably the worst living conditions as far as a basement is concerned that I've seen in 20 years.
And there's no easy fix.
This sort of work is likely to cost, at the very least, £75,000 to £80,000.
Dennis Richardson bought this basement flat in Gypsy Hill, South London back in 2001. But despite being fiercely independent, she's fallen victim to a deluge of water destroying her home.
The whole of the lower ground floor is unusable.
And her garden is rife with the UK's most invasive species of plant, Japanese knotweed. Dennis's sanctuary has turned into a living hell. It's time to get in the best of the best to get to the bottom of the problems. Our investigation starts with an assessment from structural engineer Simon Pitchers. He wants to begin in the basement where the damage is worst.
We've got water pouring underneath the wall, bubbling up through holes here. Heaven knows what that's actually doing to the soil that's underneath the foundations. Now, I'm very concerned that this is actually going to start to create structural problems.
Simon's in no doubt that the horrendous water penetration needs to be urgently addressed. This calls for damp specialist Steve Hodgson. He's dealt with many problems in basement flats, but nothing to match this. He suspects the water coming in is sewage, coming from drains taking the waste away from loos.
First of all, the waterproofing that's been applied to the wall is really rubbish. It's not working at all. The system that somebody's tried to install is completely inadequate. We've also got lots of water literally running out of the brickwork. The amount of water and I'm afraid the smell that's associated with it suggests also that it's a broken drain somewhere. This is by far the worst environment that I've ever come across in a basement for occupation. The floors are allowing water to travel underneath them in between the layers of the floor, so the floors will have to come out. To put this job right, to make this basement habitable, I'm afraid that it will require a complete and utter strip out and start again.
The source of the water in Dennis's lower ground floor appears to be somewhere behind this one wall. And with a constant stream of water flowing underneath her floor, there's a real danger it could be literally washing away her foundations, putting the whole building at risk. It's difficult to take in the conditions in which Dennis has been living, and I'm determined to help her. Our investigations have revealed the waterproofing used is not up to standard for a basement flat, but that doesn't explain the amount of water coming in or the smell. The disused basement in the neighbouring property is then investigated, and confirming our suspicions, a foot of sewage water has built up. This can be fixed on their side, but Dennis's damage needs putting right and her flat still urgently needs tanking.
This is really bad, don't you think?
This isn't just rising damp, this is penetrating water. But there are ways that you can apply special drain tanking systems onto the wall, where the water comes through the wall, falls to the bottom of the tanking, and then it's conducted away from the building.
The tanking system Simon is recommending acts as a barrier and uses a pump to transport the water away from the building. What Dennis has got to accept is that this is a massive job.
It is absolutely huge. You look around you, everything would have to go. Everything you see, every surface of every wall, floor, everything has to go before you even start.
It's going to be a shock for Dennis to discover she's got such a huge job ahead. Outside lies yet another threat to the building structure. In comes environmental consultant Dr. Paul Beckett to examine the Japanese knotweed. Personally, I've not tackled Japanese knotweed myself, but Paul is the man who knows the correct way to deal with it.
If you negligently allow knotweed from your property to spread off your property, then you run the risk of being prosecuted.
So how would you deal with the Japanese knotweed here?
Well, the first thing we would do is break up the root system by chopping up the soil.
With a spade
By
or a
digging it with
rotavator?
a rotavator or an excavator. The issues there are that everything would have to be cleaned afterwards to make sure that it's not spreading contamination off-site. Allow that to regrow, and then you apply herbicides. Now, you could do that yourself with the stuff you can buy from your local hardware shop. However, that is a lot weaker than the sorts of chemical that can be applied by an expert.
Japanese knotweed was introduced to Britain by the Victorians, who brought it back from the Far East. They admired its lush greenery, but little did they know they'd imported a monster to rival the triffids. In Japan, the plant is controlled naturally by a combination of native fungi, insects and diseases. But in the UK, it has no natural predators. It's spread across the country to become a rampant invasion. Knotweed can be recognised by its lush green heart-shaped leaves and bamboo-like stems. If you think you have it, act fast. Japanese knotweed's roots can spread up to 7 metres in radius and up to 3 metres deep, and can cause serious structural damage to your property. Many mortgage companies won't lend if it's found at a property. This is a serious menace. I certainly didn't realise just how bad Japanese knotweed can be if it's on your land and in your garden. The most important thing is to be vigilant, look out for it, and if you have got it, deal with it properly, because it can end up in criminal prosecution if you don't. The third major problem is Dennis's electrics. Water is pouring along the wires into live sockets, and the downlights in the lower ground floor are in a shocking state too. Electrician Tony Cable checks the sockets first.
Quite frankly, I don't believe what I'm looking at. I mean, this is absolutely lethal. This has got to be isolated as a matter of urgency. And the mere fact that someone's living here, I mean, look at all this water, these puddles. It's a wonder they haven't been killed already.
Next up for inspection are the downlights.
Now, obviously, this is a transformer. There should be a nice job. Oh, there's not. There should be a giant box there encasing that. That's 230 volts, and that is actually live. It should be enclosed, because if there was a loose connection, something like that, that could, in fact, start a fire.
Tony cuts off the electricity until Dennis has a total rewire, which will cost about £4,000.
I don't think I've ever seen one quite so dangerous.
Over 8,000 fires a year in the UK are started by faulty electrics. If you have any reason to suspect a problem with your electrics, switch off at the mains and call in a qualified electrician as soon as possible. After years of living in squalor, it's time to tell Dennis there is a way to fix her home. At a price.
Well, we've had a really good look, and I think you know it's quite serious, the problem. There is a solution, which is to tank the whole of this area. It's not cheap. The reality is this sort of work is likely to cost, at the very least, £75,000 to £80,000. Do you have any, I mean, have you got any access to money?
Some, but nothing like that amount.
How much money would you?
Probably about 20.
I think you have to find the money somehow, and you've got to get it habitable.
Even though I knew it was going to be a lot of money, I didn't know it was going to be that much. But it needs to be done, it has to be done, so I'm going to have to find a way.
I know what a huge shock the money is for Dennis, but the good news is that it's well worth her investigating how to recoup the cost. Meanwhile, there's upheaval ahead.
This is going to involve you moving out, and all your stuff needs to move out. This is a building site, effectively. This is starting from scratch. Do you know, I think there's a whole load of stuff that would be easier if you shared this with
I
someone
think you're probably
else?
right. I think you are, well, you are definitely right. I think all of my friends would immediately spring to action, and my family too. It's me that's been sort of, no, I'll do it, because I think it's that thing, you know, I think I'm a grown-up but I should be able to cope.
Yeah. No one can cope in isolation. Everybody needs someone else in life.
It's brilliant that we've got to this stage, and I now feel like, you know, we can go forward, and yes, it'll be good to get rid of a lot of the rubbish and the stuff that's been ruined, and I've been kind of trying to sort it out, but it's just too much.
Fiercely independent Dennis has faced her problems at home alone for years. Jill is one of Dennis's oldest friends from college days.
Hi.
Along with husband Steve, I've arranged for them to help clear Dennis's lower ground floor. It's the first time in 5 years she's let anyone close see what's become of her home.
Right, obviously you haven't been here for some time.
Oh my God. Okay. It's Dennis. This is just horrible.
It's just unbelievable.
I don't know how you've lived with this, then. It's just.
Well, you know me, I can live with anything.
Oh God, the smells. I mean, the smell is just indescribable, isn't it?
We had absolutely no idea it was this bad. I mean, I knew it was bad. She said it was bad. She said there was damp and wood and rot and things, but it's indescribable. You can't until you see this. It's just the worst thing I've ever seen.
This is the real problem.
Oh
God!
Dennis. Oh my God. Oh my God. The smell, Dennis. I mean, it's really stomach churning, isn't it? The whole place, it just, you know, it smells like a riverbed. I don't know how she's put up with it. You know, I think possibly I might have just shut the door on it and walked away. You know, it's Dickensian. You would not let people in this day and age. You wouldn't let people live like this 100 years ago.
Steve's right, and today is the beginning of the future. It's time to throw out the old and the rotten and put the rest into storage.
That's just going in the skip. That's going in the skip. An old scanner.
That's going, yes.
Some of the magazines, which I'll start putting into black bags.
This has been a momentous day for Dennis. She's accepted help and her basement is starting to clear. In theory, work can commence.
Seeing something starting to actually happen, seeing the big clear out actually getting underway, it's just great, you know, that she finally can see a light at the end of the tunnel.
It's a massive relief because at one point it just looked so overwhelming, the whole thing. Just the amount of stuff that I had and the amount of work it would take to get rid of it all. Having got my friends involved and having done just one big push, it's been great. No, it's a big relief.
Jill and Steve have been so shocked by Dennis's flat, they've invited her to stay with them until her home is put to rights. Next, just as things start to look up,
I can't thank you enough because it's going to be the end of a very long nightmare for me.
there's yet another setback.
It's clearly absolutely catastrophic in many ways. Dennis bought her dream home 10 years ago, but that dream soon turned into a nightmare of epic proportions. The reason? Every house's deadliest enemy, water.
Designer Dennis's Gypsy Hill flat has been under attack for 6 years.
At the moment, the whole of the lower ground floor is unusable.
Outside, invasive Japanese knotweed is on the rampage. Inside, sewage water is swamping the basement, leaving a rotten stench. And the extent of the water ingress is more bad news for some already seriously dangerous electrics. Dennis urgently needs to find a company who can make it waterproof. Despite not knowing how she will pay for the work, today specialist waterproofing surveyor Colin Hutton is coming to take a look.
Well, it does appear to be a bit of a mess.
Colin's assessment will determine how best to proceed.
Well, it does appear to be a very grim situation for Dennis. I understand there's not a lot of finances available for the project, so I think what I'll do is I'll have a word with my boss and see if we can come up with a compromise, and as I say, I'm sure there's something we can certainly do to help her.
A couple of phone calls later and Colin meets Dennis in the local cafe to deliver some great news.
We've had a look at the problem. We are prepared to help you. We will install a cavity drainage membrane system which is fixed to the walls and laid to the floors.
OK, well, it doesn't look like much to me, but I'm very glad to hear that you can do it. It's fantastic news. I can't thank you enough, because it's going to be the end of a very long nightmare for me.
It'll be our pleasure, and we'll give you back your bedroom and your lower ground floor, which you've missed for a long time.
That's brilliant, thank you. I'm thrilled at the news. Can't quite believe that they're going to do it for free, because the cost of it would be more than my budget, my entire budget. So that's just brilliant news.
Colin and his company have made an extremely generous offer, taking pity on the desperate situation Dennis is in. But if money's tight, it's always worth asking if discounts are available.
I'm very interested to see how it works, because I can't quite believe that that little bit of plastic is going to solve all my problems. But I do believe him when he says it will. I'll just be interested to see it.
There's a perfect place to reassure Dennis this will work and make her flat totally waterproof. Time for a little demonstration in the middle of the sea. And this is where we're going. It's a Napoleonic fort called Spitbank, just off Portsmouth Harbour, that was built in the 1860s, and it was built bedded into the seabed. If this can hold a damp out, well, they know a thing or two about damp proofing.
Yes.
Spitbank Fort is currently being converted into a holiday venue. As part of the modernisation, they're using the same waterproofing method as proposed for Dennis's flat. If it can keep out the Solent, it can work in Gypsy Hill. This is what we're going to use to keep the water out of the lower ground floor level of your flat. Mm-hmm. And what we're going to use to do that is this membrane, which is a continuous membrane that runs around all the walls and the floor of the rooms. And if there is any moisture, it runs down between these little knobbles, all the way down to the bottom, and then into a system of channels, which is here. Mm-hmm. In your flat, there'll be a pump that which will pump the ambient water away. We test the plastic membrane gradually, starting with a gentle flow of water. So that's if it's got a little bit of water, but actually this system works even if there's quite a lot of water running between the lining and the structure itself.
Whoa!
Even with a powerful jet of water hitting it, the shape and strength of the plastic membrane means it's able to withstand the pressure. You go around the other side and see if it's dry.
OK. It looks pretty solid to me. As I stood behind it and had Sarah spray the water at me, and I know I was bone dry on the other side, so it will be very nice to see all the water running away rather than running down my walls and into my house. I can't wait.
This is the one way you're going to ensure that when you're inside the lower ground floor of your flat, you are totally dry. The preparation work for the tanking in Dennis's basement flat gets underway. Costing £800, Dennis has got a team of local builders on the job.
finally, work has begun. It's very exciting. There's all sorts of things going on in there, and I can't wait to see the finished product.
First up, rotten cupboards and stud partition walls are ripped out. Whilst the builders crack on inside, we're going to get rid of Dennis's Japanese knotweed outside. Japanese knotweed is a problem, but most of the difficulties with it is that people are fearful of what to do. The most important thing to remember is to deal with it quickly and deal with it the right way. 10 weeks ago, our environmental consultant, Dr. Paul Beckett, had his team cut the plants back to their crown, which is where any clumps of new growth will emerge. 6 weeks later, and with the new shoots visible, he sprayed them with herbicide, ensuring the poison travels down through the new growth into the roots. Each spray treatment costs £250 and should put a stop to any spread. Today, it's the final stage of this first round of treatment. To save Dennis a few £100, we're going to tackle it ourselves, with another helping hand from Dennis's friend Jill. So far, it's been sprayed and it's been chopped down. The difficulty now is that you mustn't transport it off the piece of ground, because even if it's a little tiny piece of root like this, it can take hold and grow somewhere else. It's actually also a controlled waste, which means that you can't just take it off your land and go and put it somewhere else, because it's so persistent. It grows wherever it gets a hold. And so you either need to leave it here and look at it, pile it into the corner and wait for it to rot down, or burn it.
OK, we'll burn it.
As well as digging up the roots and destroying them, it's important to rip apart the roots we can't get out. This encourages the plant to grow more leaves, which makes applying herbicide easier on any new growth and more effective. Ideally, you want to break it up as much as possible, so when it comes back, you've got lots of leaf compared to the size of the root on which to get the herbicide so that it can poison it. The reason doing it ourselves cuts costs is it's hard graft. The whole process of cutting back, spraying, burning and digging will need to be repeated 5 to 6 times over the next few years to make sure the knotweed is completely eradicated. Down in Dennis's lower ground floor, work is continuing in preparation for the tanking. Today sees a site visit from Dennis's own structural engineer, Martin Long, who's here to assess the integrity of her property and make sure it's repaired correctly.
Before the building work starts, we thought it a good idea to do some trial pits and some trial holes in the ceilings to work out how the structure works and check that we understand it and check for any structural problems.
Inspection holes are being made in the floor and ceilings to check whether loads are being taken in Dennis's flat. This leads to a devastating discovery.
The wall is unstable.
What's become apparent from the inspection holes is that at some point in the past, work has been done down here that seriously affected the structure of not only Dennis's flat, but the 4 stories of flats above. It's going to cost thousands to sort it out, but there isn't a choice. Before any more work goes ahead, it must be fixed. The load-bearing walls have been removed and no support was put in their place. On top of that, the basement floor has been lowered beneath the existing foundations, which could destabilise the building further. This is a massive blow. At some point in the past, work has taken place which has left the building lacking load-bearing support. This alone could leave Dennis's home in danger of falling down, even without the devastating damage the sewage leak has caused. This calls for major remedial work to the structure. All work has to stop while a new plan is drawn up. A plan that could be very costly. Obviously, we don't know exactly at what point somebody did dig down and undermine the foundations. No. We can only guess that. The major issue is fixing it and making it stay up, isn't
Yeah.
it?
And I wouldn't have discovered any of this if you hadn't come in. I mean, I would have still been living here believing that it was just a water influx problem.
So actually, in an awful sort of way, maybe the water ingress was lucky.
Yeah. Maybe.
So, on the upside somewhere within that.
Yeah, something good has come out of it.
The plan to fix the structure is going to cost more than Dennis's £20,000 budget. On top of that, because it will affect the party walls of her leasehold flat, permissions have to be sought. This will all slow things down. Getting all of those signed consents in place is likely to take some time, unfortunately, so it's a delay.
It's one of the things that is frustrating, but it's got to be done, so I shall wait on that being done.
I'm so glad Dennis is still trying to see the positive side of a horrible situation. But the bare facts are that for now, all work has to stop. Dennis is effectively homeless, and this new set of problems will take a massive chunk out of an already overstretched budget. Coming up, with Dennis having to rely on the hospitality of her friends.
I'm used to being at home on my own, so it's quite an odd situation for me.
Will she ever get home again? Sewage water has been pouring into the lower ground floor of Dennis Richardson's 2-bedroom South London flat, leaving horrendous conditions.
My way of dealing with it became staying out a lot and going elsewhere.
Work has finally started to put right the wrongs, but now disaster struck. Investigations revealed a dangerous absence of load-bearing walls. With the entire structure of the flat in jeopardy, it's proving one problem too far for Dennis. Progress is at a standstill as Dennis waits for permission for the work to start and tries to raise some extra funds to cover the additional structural problems that have been found. Soon, weeks have slipped by, no work has happened, and Dennis is still living with friends Jill and Steve.
I thought initially, at this stage, I'd be back in my home. I thought that, everything would be done and I'd be back in and it would all be fairly straightforward. But nothing in life is as straightforward as we expect, is it?
It's a very stressful situation. 10 weeks on, after work stopped, something finally gives. A family member lends Dennis an extra £5,000, bringing her total budget to £25,000. With the generous offer of free tanking and the possibility she may be able to recoup some of the costs, Dennis's budget is about right to cover the remainder of the work. And there's no time to waste. Downstairs, new load-bearing walls are built in preparation for the all-important tanking that will keep this basement waterproof. The damaged and dangerous electrics are replaced with a complete rewire. And the garden is completely cleared to help stay on top of the regrowth of the Japanese knotweed. Knowing her flat is on the road to recovery, Dennis can think about making it home at last.
This has been a roller coaster ride right from the start. For 6 months, we've been looking at this flat and trying to get things moving. And not once, but twice, it looked like it was going to be impossible to make any difference at all. Finally, though, 2 weeks ago, work started, and I'm back to see whether this flat is finally on the road to recovery.
Before, this floor was a foul-smelling swamp with rotting furniture and sodden walls and cupboards. Now the damage has been stripped out, the structure supported and new load-bearing walls put in. I'm keen to hear what the site foreman Albert has to say about the job in hand.
When you first saw this, what did you think of it?
It was horrendous. It's the worst I've ever seen. And that's truthfully.
Really?
Yeah. The damage, the rising of it, was the worst I've ever seen.
Once the structural repairs are complete, the crucial tanking work using the special membrane that we tested in Portsmouth Harbour will start, overseen by specialist waterproofing surveyor Colin Hutton.
How long will it take for you to fit the waterproofing?
Well, once the floor slab has been cast, we can come in and our works would probably take 2 to 3 days.
How fantastic. And what an amazing thing to have that done.
Tanking is a method for adding waterproofing into a building. It uses a special plastic membrane. This acts as a barrier to protect internal living areas. A pump is installed to transport any water away before it can cause damage. The waterproof membrane will be applied to all 4 walls of Dennis's lower ground floor, effectively turning it into a watertight box. Safe in the knowledge the supporting structure of her flat is no longer under attack, Dennis has been able to transform the upstairs. After years of living in squalor, her kitchen is now a bright, dry, airy sanctuary with no crawling damp.
Oh, goodness, that's so lovely. When I first met you 6 months ago, it was a very different place.
Yes.
That you were in.
I was definitely in a very different place, as I say, because I'd been through years of trying to deal with it and trying to get other people to help me deal with it and not got very far.
So what did you think would happen? It was just...
I thought I'd probably just live here and die here because I wouldn't be able to sell it because it wasn't worth anything.
It's been a tough journey, this, hasn't it?
Well, I think, yes, there have been lots of tears along the way, but that's over now.
Good, good. Well, like, when you look out at the garden, I mean, this is such a lovely room. It's beautiful, that space out there. That window is amazing.
I'm very pleased with that.
It's actually a really good thing this kitchen's done, because whilst all of the chaos of downstairs is going on, to have upstairs civilised and you to be able to use it as a sanctuary is so important, because it's been a very, very hard emotional struggle, the whole of this process. And I do think that this is really important in the recovery of the flat and your recovery as well.
Having this done allows me to sort of visualise downstairs done again, where at one point I couldn't see it happening, could not see how it was ever going to be a nice home again. So yes, I do think it's made a big difference.
Dennis's sitting room used to be crammed full of her belongings and even served as a temporary bedroom. But now it's a clean and welcoming lounge, perfect for relaxing and entertaining.
Oh, goodness, that is absolutely fantastic. It's completely and totally transformed. This room did end up being your everything room, didn't it?
It did, because for several months before I moved out, I was sleeping on the sofa because it was impossible to use the downstairs at all.
What do you feel you've learned from this whole experience?
I do realise that sometimes you can't do everything, and I'm very, very fortunate that I've got a fantastic support system in friends and family.
It's a really lovely room. Do you have any more plans for it?
Yes, I do. I've got lots of things that I want to put in this room. I've got 2 enormous gilt mirrors that I've had for some time that I want to put in here. I just want somewhere I can come and be comfortable and have my friends round.
Well, that's a start.
Yeah.
Outside, the garden was once under attack from a jungle of Japanese knotweed. Now it has been stopped in its tracks, giving Dennis a lovely terrace on which to entertain. After years of hiding herself and her home away, this is not only a physical but an emotional leap forward. And as if to mark the occasion, the heavens have opened. But it still looks gorgeous.
The ground floor up here is now looking beautiful, and that must help, doesn't it, with the vision for downstairs? Does it feel that you're...
Without a doubt, it gives me a much more optimistic view of what can be achieved.
There's lots of stuff still going on downstairs, and there's weeks of work still to go. And I can come here during the day, still checking on them, and sit in my nice kitchen and sit in my nice sitting room, and know that, you know, one day it'll all look like that. Or one day we can hope it will all look like that. It's a fantastically big change for me now to actually be able to come home and feel like it's a home. It's bright and it's nice and it's clean and it's welcoming. It's well on the way to being my dream home again.
There may be a bit of a way to go, but Dennis has turned the corner of her 6 years of misery in her flat. There's a light at the end of the tunnel, and very soon she'll be able to enjoy a warm and dry home again.